I don't remember clearly when and where I first heard about Dwarf Fortress, but it wasn't long before the Steam release was announced. I think it might have been the first no-clip documentary potentially, but my mind has been dulled by my love of the Halfling's Leaf. And I have this nagging feeling that it was mentioned in other media and podcasts I was consuming at the time. On immediate reflection, it may not have been that first video, as I feel like I already knew about it before then, because I remember being pretty psyched for what was obviously going to be a high quality viewing experience when the video dropped in my feed. I mean, it is no clip after all. But I'm also pretty sure I had actually downloaded the free, esoteric and unknowable original version of the game from the Bay12 website. I laboured to get it up and running and just sort of pushed buttons randomly, staring at it like Neo seeing the Matrix for the first time on those screens in the Nebuchadnezzar, not having a clue what I was looking at. The reason I have this memory is that I distinctly remember abandoning my attempts to play that version because, as I mentioned a minute ago, the Steam version had been announced, so after experiencing the quite frankly demented menu systems, I closed it down and immediately went and added it to my wishlist on Steam and made a mental note to just wait for that glorious day when it finally released. My interest was well and truly piqued. I had no idea when that would be because the expected release date just read "Time is a flat circle" or something similar. An early indication to me of the kind of humour the Addams brothers bring to this fascinating project. But what is Dwarf Fortress? I'm assuming that many, if not all people clicking on this video probably know. But for the uninitiated, I shall give a brief explanation. Dwarf Fortress is a sort of city building, or fort building to be more precise, strategy game where you direct but don't entirely control a group of dwarves. You'll set instructions to dig out this area or chop down these trees, and you'll designate areas to store things and where to put rubbish or where to assemble and socialise, but the dwarves will just kind of do their thing based on those instructions. You can set them up to have certain jobs like miner, woodcutter, cook or farmer, but you don't specifically click on a dwarf and instruct them to move here or there. They sort of have a certain amount of agency. Your goal is to build a fortress with all the necessary elements for continued success, like farms to grow wood, workshops to craft useful items and brew booze, taverns, hospitals and barracks for defence, as well as a whole host of other options to help your fortress thrive and attract new dwarves. You start with 6 or so dwarves and a bunch of standard resources. If you wish, you can customise all the resources and skills your dwarfs start with so as to give yourself the best possible start. And all of this takes place in a persistent world where you will play multiple games, each time adding to the timeline of that particular world. And that world and its entire history is generated in full from every book written, every rival fort built, every monster born and slayed, and every civilization that came and went. You can choose how many years you procedurally generate from 100 to 500 years, and once that world is fully formed, you choose a spot within it to start your fortress. You'll have to consider where you start based on how many trees there are and the type of minerals available and what type of dangerous beasts are roaming the wilds around you. And when you are ready, you strike the earth as instructed and begin to dig. If you are looking for flashy graphics, then you are shit out of luck. You get a static tile set that move around but generally aren't animated, but they give you a decent visualization of what is going on and on the whole are pretty nice to look at. And if you think this is confusing, then this is how it originally looked before the Steam release. For the uninitiated, this is ASCII graphics, which utilises keyboard characters, so you would literally have to learn what each of them actually represented to know what was going on. One aneurysm, please. The world, its history, and every living creature within it are all accumulating and logging data about their individual experience, and you can read through that information and delve deep into everything. And I really do mean everything. And I mean really deep. The level of detail in Dwarf Fortress is quite frankly insane. If you have ever watched any interviews with Tarn talking about dealing with bug reports and building out the ever-expanding and complex systems that all overlap and interact with each other, you will have seen him talk about how he would go off and read up on things like how eyelids work or medieval taxes or some other varied topic just so he can improve and iterate upon the absurd depth of the game. How deep the game goes is something that genuinely impresses me. You can't see it by just looking at it, and even less so in the original version of the game, but every dwarf, cat, dog, giant crow, yeti and zombie lizard man has teeth, muscles, eyes, skin, limbs, thoughts, feelings, regrets, hopes and dreams. And each of those things are treated as a separate entity on their own within the game. I once remember reading a note that one of my dwarves threw someone by the teeth. Very specific. I knew the game was incredibly deep and rich from hearing about it, but I remember when I was playing it on stream one time and just spending something like 30 minutes reading all through one of my dwarves' profiles, just learning about them and how they felt sad because they had had an argument with a friend and how they didn't care for their work anymore and felt down that they wasn't able to create works of art. Poor little bugger. Even as someone who did know about the potential death, I was still shocked at just how deep and just how much was journaled. Sometimes that deepness kind of feels overwhelming, and the game as a whole in general. Like a great bit of challenging French cinema like Le Haine or Irreversible. I think they are masterpieces, but I'm just not sure I can deal with it all right now. Like I often look at Dwarf Fortress sitting in my Steam library and I am drawn to it, but then I think about all the little things I will have to manage and deal with, and I sort of get overwhelmed and just choose to play something dumb. But I still love it even though I don't play it as much as other games. Just like the aforementioned French cinema, Le Haine is literally on my favourite films of all time list, but I have probably only watched it a handful of times at best. And Irreversible, well, as impactful as that film is, I think repeated viewing wouldn't be very good for your mental health. But when I do have the compulsion to hit play on Dwarf Fortress, I am locked in for days. Endless amounts of thinking that I should go to bed, but I'll just set this room to be mined, or we just need another stone or stockpile, or the carpenter has been possessed and I wonder what he'll make. And then I can't stop now because something fucked up that I didn't pay attention to, and now everything is on fire. Which does lead me to a strange curiosity about Dwarf Fortress, which is, in many ways, it is, or at least it has, many of the same things that I hate about survival games. I may have mentioned it before, and I'm pretty sure I have it down on my list of video ideas to make a video about why I hate survival games, and why I think other people love them. But I generally hate the whole punch a tree to make an axe, to cut the wood, to make something else, and then make something else, and then make something else, and then make something else, and etc, etc, so on and so forth. And while Dwarf Fortress isn't totally like that, it does have a teeny bit of that. I think the difference with Dwarf Fortress and other survival type games is how death and loss is framed and experienced differently. In survival games, I hate that I die and I lose all my progress and I have to run back to my corpse to pick up my stuff, and it just pisses me off that I am being held back and having too many obstacles put in my way. Like my time is being wasted. If I die in an MMORPG, I feel like there is a fairer and smaller inconvenience incurred. Now I know, in survival games this is primarily a skill issue, certainly, but it just kind of grinds me down. I just feel like I'm being stopped from doing the part of the game that I want to do. But with Dwarf Fortress, when everything starts going to shit, and it does quite frequently, I embrace it, I welcome it, and I want it. Because that is where the real genius of Dwarf Fortress is. It is the stories that come out of the seemingly endless things that can happen. Just like a roguelike, you're supposed to die. It's part of the game. It makes for the funniest tales when things just start to cascade and you stick with it even though you know the end is coming, because that is the good stuff. And because everything can take place within a persistent world that you procedurally generate, your failed fortress is not just a funny story of calamity, it is literally history. My first proper fortress that I got running to any degree was beset by wombat men and a giant chinchilla. But somewhere within the constant battles, one of my dwarves, or perhaps a visiting dwarf, became a fucking necromancer. Before you knew it, the wombat men were only a minor concern, as suddenly everything that died kept coming back as zombies. All my livestock, all my dwarves, even a poor yeti that wandered too close and got filled in. There was even zombie babies. In another fortress, I went absolutely berserk, getting the dwarves to pretty much do nothing but grow plump helmets and brew wine, and the stockpile went on for days. Chop tree, make barrel, grow plump helmets. The child in me will never get over that name. Make wine, fill barrel, repeat. Then we were attacked by some were-elks, which worried me as I had previously had issues with were-animals and all my dwarves getting infected, but they managed to stab those bitches up nice and clean, preserving the fortress of Steel Trumpet and its copious amounts of quality wine, which I had started trading at volume with the caravan that comes by periodically. My military was working and my axe dwarves were the finest I had managed to nurture, with the proceeds of the wine helping to kit them all out with the finest gear wine could buy. They slayed a two-headed ettin and took down several cyclops from the local area. But sadly, the were-shits come for us all, and a moment of recklessness meant that my hardest bastard warrior somehow got infected while battering a rather unassuming were-lizard, and assuming that nothing was wrong, the full moon came and suddenly I was miffed as to why there was a were-lizard deep in my fortress kicking the shit out of everyone. The other dwarfs took it down, and I thought the problem was dealt with until the next moon rolled around and suddenly there were 6 of the fuckers. In the end, my population slowly dropped and more dwarves were either infected or killed as my mighty brewing empire was reduced to just 2 were-lizards knocking about by themselves. I thought maybe they could just start to repopulate as were-lizards and that could kind of be their thing, but one of their victims decided to take revenge. I got an alert that both were-lizards had died, and upon inspection of the logs, they were strangled to death by a ghost baby. A fucking ghost baby. Recently I started playing it again, and my first fortress out of the gate just got wrecked by giant birds. First, some of my dwarves got pecked to death by giant sparrows, which is kind of insulting because notably the sparrow is a tiny little weak bird, so it kind of feels like you are fucking with me sending big ones to attack me. It's like sending a giant bunny to kill me. But like so often happens in Dwarf Fortress, that was just the starter, an aperitif if you will. The main course was yet to come. You turn your attention to plump helmets, for 1 second, that alert starts ringing in the corner, and when you centre on the action, what do you see but a couple of giant crows murdering everyone. A murder doing a murder, if you will. Eventually, all I am left with is everything covered with vomit, blood and dismembered dwarves. My next fort I barely got going before I seemingly dug too close to a river and everything collapsed and filled with water and drowned everyone. And in my last fortress before writing this script, I dug deeper than I had ever before. I had thriving farming, brewing and gem cutting industries and had made my way through numerous underground caverns on my way down. And then whilst getting some background footage for this video, I made the mistake of going to get a cup of tea and leaving it running. And then when I came back, there was blood everywhere. Lizard men and bat women and blind cave bears and some other fucking squiggly thing had killed all of my dwarves and most of each other. What a fucking demented battle that must have been. All in the space of a brew. But these events are what make the game interesting. Even more so than a roguelike, death and failure are the point. As I said, each fallen fortress is another beat in a larger song. And stories are what it is really all about. It has been said that the game is essentially a story generator. And Dwarf Fortress is one of those games where you could legitimately take enjoyment in just hearing about those stories secondhand. There are numerous YouTube channels dedicated to retelling these stories for people's enjoyment. Some people were supporting the game financially even though they didn't play it. Whilst away travelling for work, I sat in my hotel and just read people's stories about failed fortresses on Reddit. The stories are endless, and so is the passion from the community that plays them. And while the community of players and spectators' passion play a giant part of the whole magic around Dwarf Fortress, their passion is matched, if not exceeded, by the passion of its creators. Just hearing about a project that has been running for so many years is inspiring to me. It may be because my own mind constantly fights against me, meaning that many things I undertake never get finished, which is something I have worked at in recent years to change, and many of the videos on this channel are a testament to that. But in general, I greatly admire anyone that can demonstrate commitment and dedication. It's why I love Coheed and Cambria so much. Yes, I love proggish concept albums, giant fuzzy hair, falsetto vocals and grooving riffs, but there is something so impressive to me that those motherfuckers have been making albums around the same story for what must be decades at this point. That kind of blows my mind. I wish I could have found some of that dogged commitment when I was younger. A friend of mine has always said that I am pretty bloody minded about my music and art, and while I have always done it, I have never really achieved any great project. Maybe I just need 10% more ADHD or autism or whatever it is sitting undiagnosed in my faulty brain. So hearing about this game that Tarn had been programming for decades, getting more and more complex all the time, is inspiring. And not only that, for free. For a large portion of that time it was absolutely free. And when they did start earning any money off it, it was generally done through donations. So that to me adds an extra layer of authenticity about it. That he was dedicated to his labour of love so much that he wasn't in it to make his fortune, he just wanted to make the game. Which in any situation is the right motivation and usually sees the best results. Profit as a motive is not going to guarantee you quality. You only have to look at the continued privatisation of everything in the UK and especially our water systems to see that, but I digress. This game was made with the purest of intentions by a creator who was driven to create, who was searching for something to make him happy, and had it not have been for a family health scare, then we might have all still been staring at those ASCII symbols with a small but dedicated following, and I would wager that Tarn would still have been just as happy. But I hope that he is happy with the Steam release and that it has brought him the security he deserves, enabling him to continue his work on his masterpiece forever, like an ever-expanding fractal, each arm another doomed fortress, and with it, another story. Thanks for watching. I was in part inspired to make this video next out of my list of video ideas, which seems to be longer and longer all the time, in no small part due to the NoClip documentary series coming out. And if you want to know more about the people and the game, then I urge you to go and watch it. This video, and indeed all my videos, are based on my personal experience and thoughts about a topic, so there is so much more to learn about this fascinating game, so go seek it out.